Zewagwego. That means hello everyone in Mohawk language. My name is Janice Brant. In Mohawk, people call me Gahet Dokta, which means she goes the length of the garden, and that speaks to the kind of activities I'm a little bit known for, I guess. That's sort of how our names work. They're usually about some special gift that we have or some contribution that we make to the community. So, and this is Ken Post. He's my husband, and we've been married for 13 years. He's from the Ojibwe Nation, and he grew up in the area of the Kawartha Highlands, living on the land and trapping and stuff like that with his family. But lucky me, we met. Actually, I met his sister in university, and when I was studying, and she invited me to their home and to some of their family gatherings. And eventually, I met Ken, and we really connected. And then when we decided to move forward in our relationship, I said, well, I've never lived anywhere else but Tyendinega, and I'd really like to stay there because that is my community. And so he said that he would be willing to move. So lucky me. So he is going to do a smudge right now for all of us gathered here to honor us and to honor creation and to kind of clear, I don't want to say clear the energy, because the energy here is fantastic, I must say, and very welcoming. So what he's going to do is, I guess, just fan the smoke around in the way of their tradition, and that helps to lift people's spirits and to dispel anything that might be, I guess, keeping us from being present. I think is a good way to say it. And so what he's using, you can go ahead anytime. So what he's using to I guess, here as the medicine, it's a smudge bundle that came from the Sacred Circle, which is a gift store in our community. And it's made with sweetgrass, sage, and cedar. And those things all have special qualities that we admire as Native people and appreciate as medicine. So the sweetgrass, they say, is the hair of our Mother Earth. And that hair has a beautiful sweet fragrance that sets our mind at ease and comforts us. And so the cedar, when it's burned, they say is used to clean the house. So any lodges, dwellings, places where we might reside or worship or do the things we do, the cedar would be burned and used to clean it. So it'd be like cleaning up your house, but you just go through fanning the smoke in all the corners and along all the walls, and that's a good medicine. And then the sage, and I don't know all of those teachings the way that the Anishinaabe share that, so I'm just doing my best to accommodate him while he's doing the actual smudging. So the sage is often they talk about as a woman's medicine, but it's also just powerfully healing and a good medicine. So that's all I'm going to say about that part. He was working his way all around the room, and he started in a clockwise direction. So in the Anishinaabe Nation, they move in a clockwise direction, and they say that that direction follows the path of the sun. And in my tradition, in the Mohawk tradition, and the traditions of the Six Nations, or Haudenosaunee, we almost always go the opposite, in a counterclockwise direction. And we do that because they say our teachings are embedded in following the earth and the earth's movement. So it's interesting how Native people that don't live too far apart have some very different teachings, but yet very earthbound, I guess, and very spiritual. Did you go all the way? So I also wanted to share the opening of the Haudenosaunee people. So, as I had just said, the Mohawk Nation and the people of the Six Nations are different from the Anishinaabe nations, and we have different teachings. And so while they may open with a smudge and a cleansing ceremony like Ken just did for us, our people would say the words before all else. And it's sort of like, I don't want to say it's a prayer, it's more like a mantra, if you know what that is, or an anthem. It's hard to describe it really, because let me just start and see how you like it. So when we come together, 2 people or more, or we can even do it independently on our own as we greet the day, we say the Ohandaga Wadekwa, and that translates in English best to the words that come before all else. So the words that have to happen before we do any business and before we get too involved in our daily activities. And so they say that these words in a gathering of people are to bring our minds together as one. So we do this, we start by giving thanks to the people. And we don't thank the people first because we're the leaders or because we're above other parts of creation. We start with the people because we are the ones that need the most reminding of our role and our place in creation and to give thanks. And so we greet the people and we give thanks that we all made it here safely today and that we're in good health and that we can turn our minds for a brief moment to our families and other loved ones that aren't here with us, but include them in that good thought of being thankful for all of the people and the human beings on the earth. And then we turn our minds to our feet upon where we stand, and we give thanks to our mother who is the earth. And we give thanks to her for all the things that she provides to us to have a good life. So we give our greetings and thanks to Mother Earth. Then we turn our minds to the water, which is the lifeblood of all. And we give thanks to the fast and the slow-moving water, to the great oceans, and to all of the water that gives life to us. We give greetings and thanks. We give our minds to the fish and all of the things that live in the water that are there to clean it and help purify it and that help to provide food and nourishment to the people in a different way than the foods of the land. And we give thanks now to the water in all its different forms. We turn our mind to the roots that hold the soil in place, and we give thanks because some of those we eat. Some of those are medicine. So we give thanks for the roots that hold all of the land in place for us. We give thanks to the grass and the flowers for all the things that they provide, the softness and cover upon the earth, and the beauty that we can all see and share. We give thanks to the grass and the flowers. We give thanks to the medicines that are also upon the earth in different plant forms and in different spirit forms. So we give thanks to all the medicines and to our grandfather Hedui, who is, for people that don't know that word, that's the False Face Society, and they're healing for us. So we give thanks to them when we give thanks to all the medicine. Believe it or not, we give thanks to the insects, and some of you may be learning about the bees, and that they're in jeopardy in some places, and so we give thanks to all the insects for all of the jobs that they do, because they go about on the earth cleaning all of the time, doing a job that none of us really want to do, and that's to take things and put them back into earth and soil. And so we give thanks for all of those insects that fly about and pollinate and do that kind of job as well. Because each one of these things are important to our lives and our health on Mother Earth. We give thanks to the foods, and especially amongst the Mohawk people, we like to give thanks to the three sisters, or the corn, beans, and squash. Together they make a protein that is all from plants, which is really amazing. We give thanks for those foods because they have nourished our people a long time, and now those foods can be found almost anywhere in the world. And so that is a main contribution that we give thanks for today, that we are all nourished by these foods here that have provided for us for so long. We give thanks. We give thanks to the animals and all the four-leggeds that go about upon the earth. They provide for us in so many different ways. They sometimes offer their flesh for us. They offer their hides for us to make clothing and to make all these wonderful arts that our people have developed over thousands of years. And so we give thanks to the four-leggeds, and especially the deer. The Mohawk people give a special thank you to the deer. The antlers are used in the gastoas, or the headdresses of the chiefs, as a symbol of strength and power and respect and unity. So we honor that animal in many different ways, but we give thanks now to all of the animals in all the ways that they help us, and even our pets, because they give us comfort and friendship. And we give thanks to the trees that are big and that are small, the bushes that provide us with medicine, the trees that bear nuts and fruit for us to enjoy in so many different ways. So we give thanks to all the trees, and especially the maple, for he is the leader of the trees, and he wakes up early in the spring and he gives us the sap that we make into syrup and enjoy on our pancakes and our cornbread. So we give a special thanks to the maple tree and to all the trees. Nyawagoa. We give thanks to the birds in the sky, and that they fly about, and that they sing their songs, and that they lift the hearts of the people and make us feel happiness and joy. So we turn our thoughts now to the birds, and we give thanks for all that they do and all that they bring into our lives. Nyawagoa. We give thanks to the wind and the four directions, that those winds are important, and they help with the way that the world and all of our energy turns upon the earth. And so we want to acknowledge the north, the south, the east, and the west, and the importance of the winds and their direction. And now we give thanks and turn our minds to the thunder. So the thunder brings the rain, and it uses its lightning to dispel energy and create a new and uplifting feeling upon the earth. Because every time a storm passes through, there's this great clearing of the air afterwards. We all do it. We go, it's so beautiful. We know it intuitively, but we don't always just say, thank you, Grandfather Thunders. And so we give our acknowledgement to them today that they continue to do their job as they were given the instructions to by creation, and to help us here on earth. We give thanks to the moon. She is our grandmother in the sky, and she guides all the birth that takes place on earth, and she ebbs and flows the tides of life even inside of us. So we give thanks to the great and powerful grandmother that watches over us and lights the nighttime sky. We give thanks to the moon. We give thanks to the stars, that are up above us in the sky. Those constellations have been important indicators for human life for all time, and they still are today. How many of us look for the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper or the Pleiades? You know, those stars are important into the direction of human beings and the placement of us in the galaxy. And so we must always give honor and thanks to the stars and to the star beings. We give thanks to the sun, that he brightens our day and he warms the earth and helps things to grow. We call him our elder brother or our eldest brother. So to the humans, he's our big brother. We say thanks to our big brother for all that he does and provides to us, and the care that he comes every day to greet us and wake us up and, help us to move about on the earth in the light of the day. So we give thanks to the sun and all the many jobs that our elder brother does. We give thanks to the teachers and the guides, the prophets, the people that have shown us a better path, a better way to be in the world. And so we give thanks. There's always a special place where we give thanks for the teachers. And they come in all different forms. It doesn't just mean the teacher at the school or those kind of teachers. It's the many different kinds. And even art is a form of teaching. So we give thanks for those and how they continue to guide us here on earth. And then last, I want to turn our thoughts to creation, our Creator, however you like to look at that, but this magnificent whole universe that we reside within, we turn our thoughts there and give thanks, that we have been provided for, and that we don't have to come here together and ask for anything. All we have to do is give thanks for so much that we have already been given and that we receive each day. And so that is the way that the Haudenosaunee give thanks. And that's how we open our gatherings, is with the words that come before all else. And those are the words, but they would normally be said by the speaker in the Mohawk language. And each speaker would speak to each part the way they felt most important, like how they felt to speak to each one. And they were encouraged to tell as much as they could about each part. So sometimes the opening can take a few minutes, depending on the speaker and their intimate knowledge with creation and how they want to share that. But some older speakers and older people, and I've heard different elders say that in the past, sometimes these openings could take days, because if that elder or person felt compelled to in-depth speak about each part of creation and its role and how it helps the people, then they would do that, because that was an important reminder for all of us. So I thank you for hearing that and for inviting us to share the way that we would open a gathering in the Anishinaabe culture and in the culture of the Six Nations or the Haudenosaunee. So I would like to tell you a little bit more about me now that we've had the opening. One thing I did neglect to say is that when they are speaking the opening in the language in Mohawk, there's a part after each, so after they were speaking about the stars, say, or any other part, they would say, and they would just stand there and wait. And the people would call out, they would say to or yo at any time that opening was created. And really what that says is, so now our minds are one, and then when they pause, it gives the people an opportunity to say, I agree, so that they can, it's actually a little more interactive than the way I did it, just by describing how it was done, because then the people would actually participate. And so you were always encouraged to listen, because you wanted to hear that opening and say whether you agree to those words or not. So that's a neat other little part, but it works more effective when you actually speak the language and can actually hear all those parts. So I'd just like to tell you, I guess, a little bit about where I come from. So I was born and raised in Tyendinega Mohawk Territory. My dad is Mohawk, and he was actually raised part of his life here in the county, living in Demarest-ville and Survivesburg area. His grandfather had, and his father had bought a farm there. But my great-grandfather came here in the early 1900s to work as a foreman in one of the orchards. He was very good at grafting trees and could make many different kind of apples grow on one tree. So I'm very proud of that, those oral stories that have been passed down about different family members and where they lived and what they did. So when my dad was getting older, his grandfather was always telling him about our home and bringing him to Tyendinega. So he knew many people in the community. And when he was old enough, that's where he wanted to settle. So he moved back to Tyendinega, to the reserve, with my mother, who's here today. She's Pat Brant, but she was Pat Peeling from the Northport area. So I have a connection to Prince Edward County in many different ways, not just through today or through my dad and my mom, but going back many years, all the way to 1784, and actually just a little bit before that, my ancestor, John Deseranto, stood on the south shore of Lake Ontario at Oswego looking north and drew a map that he submitted to the government to replace the Mohawk land in the Mohawk Valley for our loyalty to the British. He drew the map that showed Prince Edward County, basically all the way from Napanee to Presqu'île. He drew it. He knew the area very well. In our tradition, this area, before the Mohawks were living here, going back a little further, I guess, they say that this land was once the homeland of the Huron, and we know that because there's a story of the peacemaker, which I'll talk about this picture, this image up here. Has anyone heard of the peacemaker before? Anyone? Well, so there's a wonderful, I don't want to call it a story because that might sort of diminish it a bit, but it's to us a true legend about what happened here in this area. And that long ago when the Huron lived here, a special person was born amongst them, and later he became known as the peacemaker because he traveled amongst the warring nations and tried to bring unity and peace. And in the end, he was able to help form the Haudenosaunee, or Six Nations Confederacy, and it was the first United Nations, they believe, ever to form in the world. So one of the things that Lynn and I discussed when I was invited to come here, I said to her, something that's very important to me as a Native person is for people in Canada to know the contributions that Native people have made to our society, because they are great and wide. Does anyone know something that was contributed by Native people to our way of life today? Yes?
Definitely lacrosse.
Absolutely, lacrosse, and that's an awesome answer. Our sports. They say rarely it was known in the world prior to contact with North America that team sports were virtually unheard of. Most sports were singular, where after meeting the American Native people and finding out they had enjoyed these many team sports, and it was contagious. It spread all over. So that's one of the stories I've heard, but there's another person.
Early settlers would likely not have made it through a winter without the help of First Nations people.
Yes, and I've heard that many times, and one of the foods that I've heard about the most in regard to that, it doesn't even have it has a Mohawk name called Onanada Umwe, but in modern times you'll find it called the Jerusalem artichoke. It was a predominant food used by the settlers that was shown to them by the natives, because we did cultivate it a little bit, but mostly it grew naturally. So those potatoes were harvested pretty much any time through late fall to early spring. It's the only time they're edible. So that put you through the winter, or a lot of people through the winter without starving. And so, yeah, we learned a lot. A lot was learned from Indigenous people on how to survive in these lands and in the winter climates and things like that. Any other thoughts? Any other ones? My husband, he thought somebody would go kayak right away, or canoe, because they often come to mind, especially if I ask children what kind of contributions they think Native people made. And they come up with some really, really good ones. But then there's other ones too, like the fact that there was a formation of a United Nations. Like they're looking at maybe the 1100s for that founding, so going back quite a ways. But there's so many wonderful contributions that Native people have made, and they're very under-celebrated today. Yeah.
Nowadays, you're always hearing about water conservation.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Native people have consistently been the main environmental activists in this country and in the United States of America, and we say thanks to them, I think, today, because we know it's important to give voice for the things that might seem like they have no voice. But if we really listen, we do hear what they have to say. So thank you for that participation. That was wonderful, and some really great, contributions that we can celebrate that Native people have made to the forming of our country. And I just want to say that that's something that's really important to me, I guess, as a teacher and different things, is to help us know and celebrate the gifts that Native people have given. And I think that will help us open up that space for Native people to come forward more often with the things that they have to share. So I went back to almost the 1100s in terms of our relationship to this location here. And then I stepped it up to the late 1700s to our relative, Captain John Deseranto. And then if we come even, just before that, so if any of you are interested, there's a plaque over in Belleville near Myers Pier. So when the government introduced legislation for the, surrender of Native lands, the law said that they had to deal with the people that were there at the time the law was implemented. So the land in this area was settled with the Mississauga people. People that study history might know that. So even though the people of the Six Nations and the people that are from an Iroquois language family were here for a long time, there was a short window when the Mississauga were living here, and so the land settlement is with them, which is interesting. It was a very delicate matter because the people at Alderville did not want to offend us because they know that we were here before, and that because of war and the fur trade and disease, many people became displaced all over North America. And so people that didn't live here traditionally then moved into the area. The law was implemented, they had to settle with them. We were sort of left out. You know, they sort of treat us like we're new to the area, but yet our history goes back a long way. And one of the things that I'd like to say about that is that this particular area, and many of you, if you're from this area, I'm thinking of Lynn's words about the bounty of this area. So even long ago, our people called this area the Beaver Bowl. So it was called that because it was abundant in food. So even going back hundreds of years, this land has been abundant in food, which is a wonderful thing, amazing. And so the Beaver Bowl is represented by a bowl in our wampum belts with a spoon. And they said no sharp object was to be used in the Beaver Bowl because no bloodshed should happen over the food. I think that teaching should still apply today. I don't know, it's just a thought that I'm putting out there. I'll try to get back on track. But sometimes there's so much history in this area, I find it hard sometimes to know where to begin. And some of that history is so intimate to me that I even cry a little bit sometimes when I revisit different thoughts of the history of these lands. And so how many people do know the community called Delhi, just over here? Okay, so one of my ancestors wrote a letter to the government saying that Delhi was being built and on the Mohawk Tract. And so that goes back a long way, right? So when those lands were being built by, when those towns were being formed, our people over here at Tyendinega on the North Shore were advocating to the government that people were coming onto the tract that was promised to us. And we never did get a deed for a very long time for the tract, from 1874 to about 1830. We lived there without a deed to the land, and therefore people were coming onto the land. And And then the government said, well, they've been there a while and now they've already built a mill, so they should stay. And so the Mohawk Tract kept shrinking. And so what you know today is that 2-minute drive through Tyendinega, that's what we have left. And we were supposed to get around 600,000 acres. That was to replace the lands we lost in the Mohawk Valley to the American Revolution, right? The Revolutionary War that was happening. And so many of our people fought hard to maintain the Mohawk homeland. And even Joseph Brant, after the British pulled out of the war and said, we have made an agreement with the United States and now we're making a boundary and this will be the Treaty of Paris. And so our people were then cut off from our homeland. And even for another probably 20 years after that, Mohawk people financed war parties into the Mohawk Valley trying to regain their home for about another 20 years after the British pulled out. And so they actually ended up calling Joseph Brant like a terrorist, and they're like, he comes here and he burns our barns and does damage to their crops. And so this was an ongoing struggle for our people. So when we think of people that are misplaced or have had to give up their homelands or things like that, I hope you'll think of us, because many people still take pilgrimages back to that land every year. Sometimes multiple times a year people visit our original home. And our original home for the people at Tyendinega is where the Mohawk River and the Schoharie Creek intersect. And it's just below Albany at it used to be called Fort Hunter, but now it has a new name. So that's our original home for the people that now live in Tyendinega. But like I said, we knew of this land previous to that because our own relative drew a map looking to this shore from that shore, and it's a very accurate map, which I was really glad to see. And I hope that maybe if any of you are interested in that kind of history, you could visit our library, because they have an abundance of this kind of information and research because of we have a lands department specifically allocated for managing the small bit of land that we have left and trying to keep it within our grasp. So there's ongoing research all the time about our relationship to this place and to document our long history here. And maybe not us specifically as the Mohawk people, but as part of the Haudenosaunee, these were considered our homelands as well. So, interesting little bit of history. But I wanted to share that because of the place that we're in and how we sometimes don't think of the Native people as a first thought. But we actually lived, all over these lands. So I guess I didn't set my timer, so I don't want to go over my time. Okay, sure. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my art, if that's okay. So I have this storytelling side to me that likes to, revisit different teachings, different parts of our culture. And I'm very interested in the foodways of the Mohawk people and the people of the Six Nations, what they used, how they had such a good and nutritious diet, that they were, in records that I've read, a picture of health. They were a very healthy people, and so I'd like to, I have a hope that we'll regain that health in our community. So through our traditional foods. So I sort of express a little bit of that in my art, but I also tell stories about our culture, a lot of stories about the peacemaker in my art. In this one here, I call it Peace and Unity. And this tells a part of the story of the peacemaker as he was trying to unite the nations together. So at one point in this great epic of the peacemaker, it says that he was standing before a great congregation of chiefs, and he held up this one arrow, and he said, "This arrow is like one nation," and then he said, and broke it over his knee. And it was broken then. And he said, one nation, that's just one nation, but we are five. And one can be broken easily, but five bound together is unbreakable. And he offered that bundle of arrows to different men that were gathered and asked them to try and break it, and they could not. And so it was a powerful symbol of the strength of people uniting together in friendship and peace, and finding different ways to resolve conflicts or issues or things like that. So that's what this painting is to me. So that's just an example of how, I guess, different parts of, like I said, these great epics have, I guess I get a visual image in my mind, and then when I have time, if I'm able, I try to make it into a painting. So this one here, even though it looks like a watercolor, it's actually an acrylic painting on paper, on a thick paper. My sister owns the original of this. She has been very supportive of my art. So this one is called Thanksgiving Dance, and it shows this great beam of light coming from the top of the sky world, down, cast over this tree of peace. So it sort of brings to light like the importance of this teaching for our people, that it casts a light over us. And so in the center you see the tree of peace, and they say that the tree of peace was planted when the Confederacy formed, and that the weapons of war were cast under the tree and carried away by an underground river, so that we would never again take up weapons against each other. So, and that was a promise that we made a long time ago. And there's lots of debate over what happened during the Revolutionary War, because it did divide the people for some period of time. And there was a short period where we did raise arms against each other. And it was a very confusing time, I'm sure, for those people. But what they did was they took the wampum belts that had recorded these really important treaties and the uniting of our nations together, and they were buried in a safe place until after the war, and then they were taken out and dusted off and rekindled. So even though for a period of time we might have stepped out of this teaching, I think our people realized how important it was to go back to it and to not have war against each other. And so it shows like the deer in the background, because his antlers were worn by the chiefs to symbolize that they were chiefs, but that they upholded these great qualities of the deer. And then off to the other side you can see a garden. And because our people were horticulturalists, we worked very closely with plants and on the land. It makes sense that there will be a garden present, and it's ripe and it's full and it's ready to harvest and to feed the people. And so the people are shown here in a special dance where the women go, where it's a man and woman together, and they're doing kind of like probably, I would say, the rabbit dance, which is a couple's dance. So it's for men and women to enjoy each other's company. But it's also a way that we have given thanks for many years. So dancing in our culture honors the animals. They are stories, they are teachings, and they are also ways that we celebrate our appreciation for Creator. I was always told, when you're representing us, you should look your best, because it's not just that we're standing up here in front of all of you wonderful people, it's that we're standing in front of the Creator. So we're supposed to always do our best. And so it also depicts the world on Turtle's back, which is also one of our teachings, that this world was set upon the back of a great turtle. And he still carries us today. And when there are earthquakes, people will sometimes say, that big turtle's got to stretch, because he gets tired carrying us all around. And there's just lots of really nice teachings within this painting. You'll see like lightning in the sky, which represents the thunder beings, and you see the birds flying about. So in every way, it also represents our relationship to creation and all those different things that we gave thanks to this morning. So again, I guess just my art is a lot of storytelling, a lot of remembering and trying to celebrate who we are and where we've come from, and the many contributions that Native people have made to our world and our society. I mean, the food ways is one of the easy ways because corn is all over the world. Many of our foods are now all over the world and still being eaten and used, and they are still a main source of nutrients for all people. But I guess I guess I should try to wrap it up. So I guess I will say that I'm thankful to my parents for supporting my interest in art. I'm not a professional artist. I don't have any training. I just love art, and I try to study it and learn how to make images that I see in my head. It's sometimes hard to translate them to canvas without proper training. But then some people have told me, but that's okay, every kind of art is a little bit different. And I find most of my inspiration just comes from learning. It comes from people that I love and have been kind enough to share their teachings with me. And then maybe I'll just say one thing about this Hubbard squash over here. It's called Sister Hubbard, and it's the inside of the squash belly. And so I wanted to sort of recognize that they are such a generous fruit. Their flesh, they give us all kinds of seeds that we can roast and eat or save for the next year. And sadly, in our garden this year, something caused all of our Hubbard variety squashes to die. And even up until like a week ago, when I would walk across these big empty spots where these were once flourishing and even starting to grow fruit before something killed them, I would get this big empty spot in my tummy, and I would feel like, wow, that's so sad that all of that kind of variety died. They were there was bugs attacking them, there was powdery mildew, it was just, I don't know, they seemed so vulnerable, and we tried different things, but we couldn't stop what was happening. And it was only about a span of 4 days from being green to being brown. So that's how quickly they succumbed to whatever happened. And it was only those types and all of our cucumbers. But it just goes to show, I guess that this was a small tribute to that's how easily it can be taken, I guess, as well as this abundance that we can receive. So I guess that painting was a little bit of a celebration, but a little bit of a mourning, I guess, too, for what had happened. And it's not the first time that I've seen that kind of thing happen in a garden. So I felt like maybe a piece of art would give me a chance to sort through that for myself. So that's all I'm going to say for now. I hope you've enjoyed the bit that I've shared about the history of the area. Some of it you may know, some of it maybe was new. But I thank you for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to share my art with your community. So, Nyawagoa.